Hello everyone, welcome to episode 7 of the Glassline podcast. I forgot my name then. This is a disaster of an episode already. Right,
welcome to the show.
Fix it in post. Yeah, there we go. There it is. We're doing a podcast.
Since I've remembered my own name now, I'm Max Phillips, by the way.
I'm Alex Maxwell.
And I'm Nathan Little. And today, funnily enough, actually, we're going to talk about editing.
Yeah, 7 episodes in, we're already falling apart at the seams on the first sentence. But what a better time than to talk about the importance of editing.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So this is going to be film editing, not video editing, even though we are also videographers. We kind of want to keep this maybe a little bit more in the film realm at the moment. So with that in mind, what do you guys think that film editors do, in your opinion?
Straight off the bat with the questions. Well, I mean, in the simplest form, they are the people that cut a film, essentially. Like that, it's very purest, simplest form. They're the ones that take the film that they're given on the day from the rushes, then they'll edit it and make a coherent story out of it. I mean, obviously, there's a lot deeper than just that, because, you know, can't do an entire hour on editing and just be like, they cut things. So, yeah, I mean, they control the story, they control the feeling and the way a film moves. It's all in the power of the edit, isn't it?
100%. I think we've said it before. There are 3 versions of a film: the one you write, the one you shoot, and the one you edit. And I think that kind of the editor's job, kind of the cinematographer, their job is to capture the director's vision, and then the editor's job is to translate it into a consumable form. What about you, Nathan?
Yeah, I mean,
Editor-in-chief?
In the simplest form, it is just, it's cutting the shots together. And I think that it's easy to put it like that, because essentially, that if you boil it down, any job, the director's job is to direct the film. The cinematographer's job is to shoot the film, right? Obviously, there's so much more behind it. Editing's quite an overlooked art, I think. That it's difficult to... I was kind of hesitant to suggest this as an episode, because it's quite difficult to talk about editing sometimes, because it does almost feel like it is. Yeah, you just put the shots together.
I think the way that I look at it, of how I see the importance of an editor, is you've got visual decisions being made within a film and in the context of filmmaking, and those are made by a variety of different people, but the 3 main people are the director, the cinematographer, and then the editor. And they all have different roles and different levels of importance, but it's solely the editor who who ensures whether that decision to have a thing look a certain way is effective on screen or not. Because if you have something that's really well shot but isn't edited right, the shot won't work for what you wanted in the first place. Same for the director. If you direct a scene the way that you want it to look, if it's not edited to match that direction style, then it won't be effective in its storytelling device.
It was one of the things I'd written down, actually. For most, I would say this is for most audiences, but there's only 2 times that you notice editing. And that's when it's really good and it's really bad. Most of the time you're going to notice when it's really bad. And I think that's the thing that that's the reason editing's so overlooked, because if it's done well, you don't really notice it, unless it's something that's like you're really trying to like...
If you're looking for it.
Yeah, or like you're bringing the audience's attention to something very specific. But most of the time it just flies under the radar, because a lot of it's continuity shots, so it's like, you know, action follows action even if there's a cut. And it's that invisible kind of job, basically, which is why I feel like editing is sometimes overlooked.
I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. I think it gets overlooked, and I think as well it's its own craft as well, because just like kind of every other element of filmmaking, there's sets of rules that you're kind of supposed to, or not supposed to follow. You're supposed to know the basic
Yeah.
rules of filming and the basic rules of editing, like you're talking about continuity. And I think, like you say, you notice when it's good or bad. If you do a cut that leads to a blatant continuity error and it just looks horrible, and you're like, okay, well, that's clearly just a mistake. One, it could have happened on set. Two, you've chosen the wrong take as an editor. But then, like in production, you can, once you know the rules, you can break them effectively.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think one particular, and I might get kind of roasted for bringing it up, for a show that I don't watch, Fleabag. Fleabag is kind of has had a head tilt to it, like a kind of tip of the hat, because they constantly cut across the 180-degree rule.
Yeah, I just want to clarify as someone who's very passionate about Fleabag, because the way you phrased it was like me and Nathan were going to get upset that you brought it up. Alex doesn't like Fleabag for some
we both
reason.
Really like it. It's not like he's like, I love this show and you guys hate it.
Yeah,
no, it's the opposite.
To be clear,
it's the opposite.
It's very
way
good.
But yeah,
but
I mean that's.
I can appreciate there's skill involved there, and they will have taken shots kind of all around the room. So it probably could have been completely possible to cut within the 180-degree rule.
Yeah.
But kind of creating that kind of disjointed feeling.
Yeah.
That is the editor there.
Exactly.
Made
that's one of the things
decision.
that the editor decides to do, because it's not. I think that's the thing that people don't quite realize about editing. It's they have control over the entire film. And it's one of the things I was doing a bit of research before to try and see how the director-editor relationship is with various directors. And one of them said, I can't remember his name, but he said, after all the shit of pre-production and production, I cannot wait to get into the editing room, because it's when we finally get to make the film.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that it makes it such a powerful tool, because you can shape it, obviously within the constraints of what you have in terms of what you got on in camera. But the way you can tell different stories, even like, not to jump straight back to our film already, but with Isle, we had about 3 different stories from the same shots, just because of the different editing techniques and styles, and even different editors, because you took over from me to make the final film, and we had 2 very, very different films.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and obviously, art, we've had this conversation quite recently, art is very subjective, and there will be an audience that would love Nathan's copy of the film, or Nathan's edit of the film, and then there's audience that will enjoy mine, and, the thing is, I don't even not enjoy Nathan's version of the film. It just wasn't what I'd envisioned.
Yeah.
Granted, neither's mine.
Isn't that always the case?
It is,
well, yeah. And it just goes back to the thing that you were saying.
Right.
The film gets made again in the editing room.
I think it speaks to the power of an edit. The filmmakers, and when I say filmmakers, I mean specifically like directors in this case. It's so common for them to sit in on edits, or if not edit themselves. Soderbergh edits himself. But it's so common for people to sit in. I remember I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, and I was watching the 30 hours of behind the scenes footage they have for that. I watch it once a year. It's like a ritual. Like, I have to sit down, I watch all the extended editions, and then I watch the 30 hours behind the scenes. But in that, Peter Jackson is well, as you say, once the film gets done, and you can imagine like the mammoth task of making a Lord of the Rings to get that done, he then sits in a small room with his editor and gets it all edited, because he knows the power of that edit, so he wants to be there to see those decisions. Because I think for editors, certainly the ones that are the best established in the industry, it's all about instinct and feeling to be good at your craft.
Yes,
to know that moment when to cut.
It's one of the biggest things in editing, which is, it can be learned, definitely. I think this is something that editors who are like the masters of their craft have obviously spent decades perfecting and their style of editing. And it is just something that comes down to instinct sometimes. Sometimes you just go, that's when the cut happens. You cut it there and then move on.
Yeah.
Just because you have that feeling that that's where it is. It's quite an interesting bit in, I think it was Tarantino that said this, but he would sit in the edits as well, like Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, all of his films. And he said,
I bet he's a really fun director to have to edit for.
Amazing to work with.
He's a genius, but
for the audio listeners, we're making faces.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I keep forgetting this is also going on Spotify now.
Yeah,
Hi,
and other
Spotify.
Platforms. You know, anything else you listen
I
to.
forget that this is going on
Google Podcasts,
streaming
Pocket Casts.
platforms.
We're on a few.
Other streaming platforms are available.
But yeah, Tarantino.
Yeah, so he would sit there with the editor, and this is back when film you'd physically have to cut things. They would make a physical stop the machine, and he said maybe it was him, maybe it was Spielberg, I can't remember, one of those two. But they said when they stop it and the editor stops it on the same frame, that's when they know they cut it.
Nice, that's quite cool.
So, and then anything between that was like,
it's
you've cut it too much, you've cut it too less, and it seems to be, at least from directors that I've listened to talk about editing, they're always trying to get like more of the film because they've been there, they've filmed the whole thing. They're like, the editor's like trying to destroy. I was here for days. We spent so much money, but it's like, the less is more a lot of the time.
But it's something that we experienced, and again, we're talking about us. Like some of the stuff that maybe we originally butted heads over, where you as an editor was saying, and bear in mind, like Nathan had a connection to it as the person who filmed it. He was the cinematographer here.
Yeah.
But as the editor, he was able to kind of detach and say, this isn't necessary for telling the story.
Yeah.
And although maybe we argued about some things, a lot of those decisions that Nathan made in his edit were carried over into mine, because you kind of see it and you go, okay, that doesn't add anything.
Yeah.
It's a pretty shot. Lovely stuff. But it's not relevant. You don't need
I think
it.
as well, the thing that made that tricky for us is it was just one character, not a lot of dialogue. Which it's the traditional way of editing is to cut around dialogue and to cut around movement.
Yeah.
But even in modern alternative editing, apart from the really extreme examples of weird stuff, it's not just about dialogue. It's more about the thing that everyone always goes back to is eyes. The way that you cut around the eyes, because it's, a character looks at something, you cut to that something at the moment they look at it. Or if you can see, if you've got a good enough actor that they say come to a realization, you can see it in their eyes before they say anything. So that's when you make the cut and you cut around it. There's a really good book that I didn't read many books at university, if I'm being completely honest. But I did have one. I think I've got it here somewhere. Here we go. Okay. Books. Look at this. Theory. It's called In the Blink of an Eye. And it's a perspective on film editing. Now, film theory is very wanky. And if you're not a student, it's really hard. If you are a student, it's really hard to read. It's pretty full on. But that book I just couldn't stop going back to. And I'm not a big editor. I definitely prefer the directing side of things, but it was that book that made me realize, editors aren't just people that chop things up. And it was that book, as I say, it's called In the Blink of an Eye, where I was like, it's all about eyes. I get it now. Like,
I'll jump in there kind of briefly. One, to compliment you, and two, as like a little mini plug, is that Max may say he's not the biggest editor. However, though Nathan kind of cuts and edits the podcast in its entirety, Max has been editing little clips that we put onto TikTok. And our TikTok handle is Glassline Media.
Yes, it is.
And, I think you've got the feel for it. It's definitely there. Especially with push-ins and text overlays. Which you see a lot in modern film.
If you like meme editing, then I'm your man. But
well, no, even so, you're editing the SNL video now.
God, yeah.
Or should be.
I just it was really annoying because I wrote a whole thing on SNL and why they need to change, and then this new series, they've changed things up, and I'm like, oh right, so I'm now making a video on why they need to change, and they've already started changing. So I've started rewriting the second half of it just so it
why they need to go
stupid.
back.
Yeah. Why I liked it before.
And then you release like the other one you'd written. You're like, they need to go back again.
It's like having a win speech and a concession speech.
Yes.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, you have a video.
Yeah. And that's in the halfway through the edit, as I say. But that will be fairly humorous, right? Humorous editing, should I say? I think in comedy it's easier to edit. I'm sure there's plenty of people that would disagree with that, but I think it's harder to make the right choices. Like all the examples that I've got in my notes for editing that I think is outstanding are from dramas. And it's because it's knowing when to cut to give the right emotion, you know? And I think the way that emotion best comes across on screen visually is sadness, probably, in terms of just a visual face, or, if you're trying to reflect a mood, it's easier to reflect a mood with just camera angles and editing. If that mood is sadness, because happy is kind of easy. It's pretty easy to reflect, if you know what I mean.
Exactly like that. For the audio
Like
listeners, do we have to do that every time you do something?
Yeah, I know. This is the thing. We've made a big effort to go onto audio inclusive
and Alex
platforms.
Keeps doing visual
Alex
gags.
does visual gags every episode.
Hey, we still have to give our YouTube watchers something.
Yeah, a
right?
reason to come to YouTube to see your face.
What we can do, speaking of editing, is, for the audio, we can kind of cut out that blank section, and for the video, we'll leave it in.
And you get all this as well, if I was discussing
Clever.
it.
Yeah.
To kind of move on about
Back to film.
What we said about editors kind of just cut things. Originally, that's all they did.
Yes.
It was a monotonous job. It wasn't.
And it was, this is very reflective of the time, but it was mostly women, because it was just men that made these films that just sort of went, let the women use the scissors.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
It was seen as almost like knitting, because it was just cutting things, sticking it together. It was seen as
stitching together.
Yeah, exactly. It was seen as quite a dull and not fulfilling job until I have it written down. It's somewhere in these notes. I believe it wasn't D.W. Griffith. It was before him. Edwin Porter. He was the first one. Now, I don't know if he had used like a collection of women to edit his films. I think maybe he was like the first one to be like, let's chop these up. But he was the first person to go, what about if I cut this frame here and then put another shot onto it? And people are like, you're crazy, man. You're crazy.
I feel like we also...
Oh, God.
we cut each other.
I was just going to say, all people did at the time was just film things that they liked. Even the people who were like the pioneers of cinema, like like Edison, were like, cinema's dead. Because there's nowhere for it to go. But that's just because all they did was film things that looked interesting. And they're like, no one wants to watch this one. They've already seen it before. So what editing did was bring stories to moving images.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It turned things to look at into a story to see.
Yeah, and I was going to say it was this because of this weird sexist choice that was made in the past, back in the 20s and 30s, in the silent film era, and in the early talkies and stuff, when it was women do the editing. It's seen as a monotonous, mundane job, which was obviously just built on nasty stereotypes that we're glad to have outdated. But it did mean that a lot of the early editor auteurs were women. So when you think of how we edit today, that's all been pioneered by women, which is kind of like a cool thing, I think. Every other thing in the fucking world has been, built by men. But this thing we hold on a pedestal, we're doing a whole a podcast on it, editing, was pioneered by women. And that's like, I think that's really cool, even if it's built on sexist stereotypes, and that's the reason it happened.
Some of the even now, some of the best editors are women. I know that Tarantino, can't remember what her name is, but Tarantino and Scorsese both work with female editors.
Yeah.
And they, the films that they make are absolutely incredible and
Yeah,
amazingly
I
edited.
can't remember
Sally
Scorsese's
Menker.
editors.
There you go.
Yeah. Scorsese's worked with her for a long time. Scorsese's editor. I can't remember her name, but
It's Sally Menker.
That's
Oh,
Tarantino,
okay.
isn't it?
Menke? Yeah, Tarantino's.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it didn't ring a bell for me, but Scorsese has one.
Yeah.
I can't remember her name, but she's always on these editing, not editing documentaries, but say it's a thing about film on BBC Four or something like that. She always appears, always talking about the history of editing.
Thelma Schoonmaker.
That is it.
There you
that
go.
Name. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, that's a long, pretentious, drawn-out point about the history of editing. But
Well, I actually had another point about editing, which I thought was quite interesting. It's the
Another one? On the editing podcast.
about history.
You're crazy, man.
Editing.
Go on.
So the two big types of editing, obviously there's like a spectrum, but it's continuity and montage.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
montage isn't what people
Yeah, I was gonna
believe
say.
montage is, where it's just like a series of shots happening.
Yeah.
That's another
Rising
word
up
for saying.
back on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
that
not like
montage.
that kind of montage.
Rocky
Monta-
montage.
Montage editing is the opposite of what continuity is. So if continuity is matching two shots, montage is making the biggest
Continuity.
montage is the biggest
Opposite,
jump
almost.
into something else. It's basically making you notice the edit. And that was actually pioneered in the Russian Revolution.
Oh wow!
I
didn't know that.
They would use, I believe it was Lenin, who saw the power of film to basically create propaganda film.
man with video
yeah.
camera.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they would create these films of like showing like the Russian flag going up and then people cheering and like all these different things happening in a very quick succession, whereas they kind of saw continuity because it was developed in European countries and in America. They saw it as quite like a bourgeois kind of style of film. They're like, we want the opposite of that. So they actually created montage, create propaganda films, and that's now something that we see in Hollywood films as well.
I suppose it's one of the things that kind of you do learn kind of studying film is the concept of kind of encoding and decoding. And there's kind of not so much about encoding there, but it's how an audience decodes the images that they're seeing.
Yeah.
It isn't kind of continuity would be kind of going from point A to another part of point A to another point A.
Yeah.
And that tells a story and the audience decodes that and gives it meaning. Or infers a meaning. But even that, where you're going from A to D to B to C, there's still a purpose there. So, like, a flag goes up, people cheer. That means the thing on the flag, it's decoded in such a way that's like, the flag. It's good.
The flag is good. And that's the thing.
Flag is good.
Like,
the flag good.
They were like, that it was used to educate, if you want, in terms of propaganda, a very uneducated populace in 1920s.
Yeah, and it was massive in Nazi Germany as well. I can't remember her name, and that's probably a good thing because she was a Nazi. So maybe let's not credit her on the fucking thing. But she's a very influential filmmaker who, obviously, after the war finished, she like denounced it all, and it's like okay. But very influential filmmaker because of her work on documentary to make these movies for again, can't remember his name. Very famous Nazi officer, but whatever. Not bothered about forgetting his name. So Joseph Goebbels.
It just
there
shows the power.
And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Shot of Hitler in a car, shot of someone cheering. Might not have been what was happening, but it creates this, idea around him. It creates a feeling which is still used today. It's just not got Hitler in it anymore. You know.
Yeah. Well, no,
We like to think it's a little less fascist.
Yeah. A little less on the Hitler
It's been an
stuff.
interesting 4 years. Yeah.
But it does just show how powerful editing is. You know, being able to take two images and create meaning.
Mhm.
It's not like you say this thing and this thing. It's kind of in your head that you go, right, these two are connected. Let me figure out what the connection is. And as an audience, you kind of, like you were saying, you kind of decode that kind of message that the filmmaker is giving you. And quite a good example is in Hitchcock's film, in Psycho.
Yes.
You never see the knife going in. You see the knife going down, and you see the reaction, and you see the blood. And the amount of people that think that they saw the knife going in is incredible, especially at that time. It was quite, you know, back in however many years ago, you weren't really used to seeing violence like that on the screen, and a lot of people had very intense reactions, but you never actually saw it.
Biggest reaction from that scene, famously, is the fact that they showed a flushing toilet. There was uproar about that. It was the first time a flushing toilet had ever been seen on screen. Yeah. I can't bear it. I shall not see it on my screen.
Yeah, exactly. That's
how they sounded in the old times.
Yeah, everyone's
back in the old days. See,
by Joe.
That's so dumb.
But yeah, on that same point, and it's going to make it a much lighter tone now because I'm bringing it back to films rather than Hitler. I think it's equally as cutting and showing one thing and a reaction creates an emotion. Also, knowing when not to cut is an editing decision that creates a reaction. And I think even an example of my favourite one, and I cry every time in this scene, is at the end of Call Me By Your Name. Have you guys seen it?
Is this in the fireplace?
Yeah. So you've got the main character, Elio, who's sort of like, he's like reflecting on this sort of lost relationship and grieving a lost relationship. And he just sits in front of the fireplace. It's Timothy Chalamet does an amazing performance. He just sits there and he cries, but he's not sobbing. He's like, just, you can see it all again in his eyes. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't cut. The credits just start. And
the credits roll over
most films would cut to black there, but it's equal parts. It's knowing when not to cut because they kept it rolling because the performance was so good, and it also then left Sufjan Stevens' Visions of Gideon playing over the top of it, which just ruins you as a person. You get so emotional, and it's that knowing not to cut. Like the instinct would be to cut to black, but that solely editorial decision made so much of an impact on me, you know, and that's quite cool.
And it is that kind of allowing time for emotion to let kind of a performance sink in, I guess. But there's another kind of purpose for that is to build an emotion in the audience, and I mean, like, that's a static shot on a static person.
Yeah.
And that's kind of showing, I mean, there's so many ranges of emotion in just that shot throughout the time of it. It's such an incredible scene. But I mean, even just keeping one shot going can build tension.
Yeah, of course.
Or drama. I mean, that's why, I mean, one shots are so popular. Even when they're not one shots, they're always kind of a point of note. You think, oh, well, that was one long shot. And it's like, well, why? Why is it a long shot? And quite often it's to build and build and build. And then when a cut happens, you're kind of like, oh, hang on. Something's changed.
One of my favourite examples of that, and it's a cool one because you know something's changed, as you say, because it's a tension building scene, but you don't know what's changed. But when you rewatch the film, you obviously know what was the kicker and what happened. It's in Inglourious Bastards, in the downstairs bar scene. And there you've got Michael Fassbender is playing an English spy who's posing as a Nazi officer, and he's with three other people who are part of the Inglourious Bastards group. But another Nazi officer is in the bar that they don't expect, and then he sits down with them, to sort of partake in this drinking thing because he sees fellow Nazis type thing, and it's this steady build of, that they're not real, and he is a real Nazi. When is he going to notice? And not to give too much away, but there's the thing that gives it away is Michael Fassbender goes 3 glasses with these 3 fingers, and then no, that's the German 3, that's the English 3.
That's the one he needed.
So he goes 3 glasses, and
for those listening. One with the thumb.
One with the thumb. I gave you so much shit for that earlier, and I've done it myself. That's amazing. But he chose 3 fingers or a thumb and 2 fingers. And it's just this simple cut to 3 glasses when he does it. And you're like, why have they cut to his fingers? Especially as an English viewer, you're like, just cut to that, and you're like, why have they shown that? That's so weird.
That seems so irrelevant.
Yeah. And then they reveal later on that that's the reason that he sussed that they were English.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, and as well, I'm pretty sure the way that cuts, I haven't watched the film in a long time, but they cut to the fingers, and then it cuts to the Nazi officer, doesn't it?
Yes.
So you can at least infer something like, there's something wrong there. Even if you don't know what it is, you can tell that there's an importance of that because of his reaction to it, or because of the fact that they've cut to it.
Yeah, his face just immediately drops.
Yeah. I think one of at least my favourite examples of editing across an entire film is in Dunkirk.
Yeah, because really cool.
Dunkirk is confusing if you don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
If you don't quite catch it, and I think I imagine it was on purpose, but you get a title card at the start of each of the I wouldn't call them scenes, but like story arcs.
Yeah, story arcs. And they're very vague as well.
Yeah.
They're like
so you have
air.
Yeah, so it's ground, sea, and air, and it says 1 week, 1 day, 1 hour for each of them. And the really interesting thing about the way that they cut together is it's in no way chronological, which is the thing that makes it confusing. The way that they cut together is on action beats. So there's a really good example of it. If you have seen Dunkirk, you'll know what's happening. There's a bit where a plane, one of the dive bombers is going over the beach and killing people on the beach, whatever. And then there's a plane, and they cut, and there's a plane going over the sea, which is 2 completely different planes. If you look at it, one of them has a yellow nose at the front and the other one doesn't. And in your head, you're like, well, these are the same planes. They're in the same area. They're cutting between them. It's obviously the same thing. But they're actually days apart from each other.
Yeah.
Which is the thing that makes it so confusing. But the way that they're editing it isn't for continuity. Even the cut is a continuity cut because it's an action beat, but it's not chronological.
I think a very similar example, but a very different film, is a film I was talking about last week about not really liking, which is Synecdoche, New York. It's a Charlie Kaufman film. As I said, I like Charlie Kaufman on and off. But I'd heard people call this film a masterpiece, and I was like, have I not heard of this, let alone seen it? So I saw it was on Amazon Prime, and then immediately just went and watched it. And I watched it with my dad, who left halfway through.
Good sign.
It's a hard watch, man, and it was just I really didn't enjoy it. I thought this is objectively very good, but I'm not enjoying it at all. And then in the days afterwards, I was still thinking about it. Yeah, we recorded our podcast, I spoke about it, and then a few days after it, I was just like, I'm still thinking about this film, and it's a film about death and decay. So Philip Seymour Hoffman, who in a way is tragically cast because he died so young, but he is the main central character, and it's his downfall in a way. It's very weird. So he makes a play in New York, and then it's all about his life, but it has to be exactly how his life happened. And it's also the set that he builds. No one ever watches the play, and the set is in a warehouse, and he makes like a life-size New York, right? So it's very fucking weird film.
High concept.
So high concept. It's Charlie Kaufman, right? He's the king of high concept. But anyway, so it's about death, and he gets older and older throughout as the film goes on. And the first time I watched it, I was like, why does he? Because he gets chronic illnesses every now and then. So he'd be like, oh, he's got an illness, and then the next shot he just wouldn't have it, and you're like, that's weird, it's gone. And you could tell it was deliberate. And it was anyway. So because it's about death, the time is constantly going on. He constantly gets older. Every shot, well, not every shot, but almost every shot, especially in some scenes, it's like shot November 12th. Next shot, it's suddenly March, but it looks like it's all part of one scene. But it just gradually keeps on getting on, and he's just getting older the whole time. So all these people keep coming into his life and leaving his life at very, very quick times. But it's seamless. But you can't. It's seamless in the edit, but in your head you're going, "What is happening?
Yeah.
Who are
Where
these
have they
people?
gone?
What's going on?" And there's a lot of weird stuff, like because it's about death, and this isn't about editing, but I want to see Alex's reaction to it because he doesn't like pretentious stuff really. But there's a famous bit in it where one of the characters buys a house that's already on fire because she dies in that house fire like 50 years later. So when it shows her buying the house, but it's already on fire at the start, as if you know this whole the decisions we make will lead to our deaths is the kind of metaphor.
Fuck off.
So she's like walking around with it. Well, it's really cringe, but there is a really funny bit in it when she's talking to the estate agent. She's like, "Yeah, I am worried about the fire, though."
Yeah.
So funny.
I guess that it's pointed out a little bit. I don't know. But come on.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but anyway,
I thought it was going to be
so
something else.
No, it's the most wanky thing ever. But yeah, as I say, it's a hard to stomach film. I think you should watch it because I'd be interested to see your reactions to it because it's really grim. Like not grim like gross, but like just bleak. And it works because it's edited so well. So it's a film I didn't like, but I can follow it semi-coherently because of how well it's edited.
Yeah. Back
Alex
to
is
you
still,
in the
yeah,
studio,
Alex is,
Nathan.
Alex, I could just see Alex's eyes just still reeling from that thing.
Yeah, I didn't like it. Didn't like it.
So one of the things I've got written down in my notes, and we did talk about it a few episodes ago, is Jaws and the way that Jaws is edited.
I did it as well. Couldn't help it.
But specifically in the way that the shark is shown.
Yeah.
Now there's
or rather not.
This is kind of by necessity, and it worked out well.
It's the best. It's the best like accidental success in the history of cinema.
Well, there's a good quote that I wrote down from Spielberg about it, which was, "The shark only looks scary at 36 frames, not 38 frames. Those 2 frames differences was the difference between something really scary and something that looked like a great white floating turd."
Nice. So American as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I thought
a great white floating turd.
In England, they'd be like, "It looked like a massive shit in the water."
But it's just that's exactly what it would have been if you'd cut it. Because it was a conversation he was having with his editor at the time. Because he was like, as we were saying before, he was out there trying to film it, trying to make it look real, and she's there trying to like squeeze it down, like saying like this isn't working, this is just not, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And like you said, it was completely accidental that it's so scary because you don't see it. And that's the thing that I think horror films don't quite get right, is that they show the monster or the villain, and then you're like, well, I know it now. Because the fear of the unknown is more scary than the thing that is actually trying to be scary.
It's one of the things I like about Cloverfield, which is weird, because it's like, I realise that Cloverfield's not exactly like a critically acclaimed film. But I think it's genuinely scary because you can believe, apart from the fact that TJ Miller's behind the camera the whole time and the idea that I'm TJ Miller is like a waking nightmare, but I could put myself in that position of being that guy in that position, and the fact you very rarely see it makes it so much fucking scarier because you're like, as you say, what is coming, what's happening, which again I think was a decision out of budget. Like Jaws was, but it all comes down to how it works in the edit.
Well, there's this new, what's it called? It's this new series on BBC, and it's like a horror series. It's called like The Terror or something.
Don't know.
I'm not entirely sure.
Shit name if
But-
that's what it's called.
But I'd heard that it was really, really good.
Mm.
And like it is kind of, I'd heard that it was one of the kind of more like genuinely chilling things to watch.
Yeah.
And I was watching something else on iPlayer, and it was kind of there on its big banner because it's new, and the trailer just kind of autoplayed. I was like, let's see what this is about. And kind of the first few shots, I'm like, oh, this looks moody. It's got a good cast, like quite a really good cast in it.
Okay.
And then they started showing these weird kind of monsters, and I went, nah,
Want to
no,
know what? That is the reason I couldn't get into Stranger Things.
because
Oh, really?
you got to
As
see it.
soon as they showed the monster, I was like, it's lost me now.
Yeah,
They
I
didn't
get that.
show it for a long time, and they kind of showed it in flashes.
But it was that I maybe it was the second episode when they revealed there's like some thing, and I was like
Like this big kind of spider
yeah,
looking.
in the underworld, and it's like,
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't the
huge.
maybe I'm misremembering then. But there was
isn't
like
it the, is it
something-
the end? I think that's the end of series 1. Am I right
Yeah.
I
there?
didn't. I got
Yeah.
to like the end of episode 2 because I'd rewatched the first episode
could
like
be wrong.
3 times. So
Yeah.
I was like, this is a good thing, and then it was like the end. I was like, I don't really like the way that this is kind of this monster is being introduced. One, I didn't know there was a monster thing. I just thought it was like, I don't know, kids go
Kind of this
missing, and there's like
force.
some like weird
yeah,
like
yeah.
horror kind of thing. So maybe my expectations were wrong for it.
I guess.
I
Also,
love Stranger
it is
Things.
called The Terror.
Okay.
I really enjoyed Stranger Things. I
Yeah.
think, I remember we watched it in the third year house, but I don't know if you were there, Nathan. Were you there when we watched The Thing?
No.
The original.
No. By accident, we watched the newer one.
Oh, gross.
Um,
I've not seen it, but gross.
turns out,
the original's
what
great.
was interesting about that is, I mean, we're kind of shying away from editing, but I guess it kind of links. Is I thought that this was a remake. It was kind of being put out as a remake because it wasn't called like The Thing 2 or like The Thing, the prequel
Right, yeah.
or whatever. It was just called The Thing. And I watched it. I was like, that's cool. I was like, I want to see how accurate they got it. So I put on the original Thing. And turns out it was a prequel. But the end shots of the newer one were identical. They'd reshot it practically
good. That's
perfectly. And if you watched them one after the other,
Oh,
it would be seamless. It would
Wow.
be
Oh,
one
nice.
big
So
film.
not even like a Rogue One thing where it shows the end and you're like, oh my god, that's a Death Star. not like that. It's literally the last frame. That's quite cool.
No,
That's-
it like all the way through it would be perfect, even to the fact that, and it's not that they used the old footage, but like they have a dog. I think it ends with a dog kind of running away in the snow.
It's the dog
And
real.
then is the dog real? Fuck you. But then, I mean, it's the same type of dog doing the same thing, and
Yeah.
then you start the original, and it's like, hey, it's that same dog, but in lower quality. You know?
Right. That
It
dog's
would
probably
kinda- if you
dead
watch
as
them-
well. That's a sad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just cheery
But it
note
doesn't
for you.
probably-
Yeah, way to bring the mood down.
Well, join us next week on episode. Shall we just end it there? End it there. Yeah.
No.
Dog's dead. Editing's good. See you later. Bye.
Excellent.
But that
I have a
no,
wire.
you finished. But that is sort of an interesting thing because I think it leads on to we've talked about time and the reason you would cut for stuff. So like the reason you would cut time, and the third thing that I hold up as the most important part of being an editor is rhythm.
Mm.
And it's to create that rhythm within a scene, or in that case to create that rhythm so it flows into the next film.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound extremely pretentious, and I'm very sorry to everyone involved.
Oh,
But
dear.
all of life has a rhythm to it.
God.
Namaste.
Yeah.
All of life has a rhythm to it. Whether you're walking, resting, conversing, arguing, or even like breathing. You know, everything you do, if you think about it, has a rhythm to it. Like it has a flow, and that's, as they very pretentious, but that is sort of how life works. You know, everything flows in a certain way at a certain pace based on a certain mood, and an editor's job, more than any other role, is to reflect that flow, of life, and to how
Baby
that
Driver.
flow of life, exactly, and to how that flow of life reflects the mood, which is exactly how Baby Driver
as well,
works.
and like Alex was saying before about rule breaking, the editor's job is to notice when there is disturbance in that rhythm and completely shut it down and just go, look at this thing, and just, because it's not just, obviously, it's about creating that rhythm, but it's also about finding ways to enhance an already good performance, shot, any of these things, just a way to just enhance the story even more than it already was.
Absolutely.
When it was
just
shot.
thinking about that reminds me of like in Breaking Bad. Now, Breaking Bad's not new, so I don't want to do particular spoilers. So I'll do a spoiler alert. I am going to talk about it, but spoiler alert.
All right.
And it is when it's coming. It's when Hank is killed.
What?
Yeah. Where he's kind of on the ground. He has a gun pointed at him, and shit, what's Bryan Cranston's character called?
Really?
It's gone. I remembered Hank.
Well, you could just go for Heisenberg if you want.
Heisenberg.
I was
is
going to
there.
The most famous Hal.
Yeah, Hal's there. Well, what's his name?
Well, Heisenberg is what his drug dealer name
What's
is.
his actual name?
But what's his name?
Oh, right, his actual name.
Oh, no, you don't know.
God. No, because I was just going for the Heisenberg thing. I thought that's what you were going for.
Well,
His real
Heisenberg
name.
is there because it's his brother-in-law, and he's like begging this guy not to kill him, and Hank's like, "You're one of the smartest guys I know, but you're too dumb to see that he made
Walter White.
Yeah, I was just
Walter White. Yeah.
I was like, I'm not googling it. I'm not googling it.
Well, he's like, you're too dumb to see he made up his mind 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
It's a great scene.
He's like, any last words or something like that, and he goes to say something, and then it would be so easy to just stay in there. You don't even have to show it. You could show Heisenberg's reaction, or like the guy shooting him, and you could see blood on his face get splattered on.
Yeah.
But it cuts to one of the widest wides that ever did wide.
Yeah.
And you just hear it, and all you see is the emptiness that you're supposed to feel.
Yeah.
Like, they are tiny on the screen. You basically can't see them.
It's like
And
The
it's
Sopranos with the cut to black. It's the same sort of thing.
How do we end this episode?
No.
No.
Yeah, because the thing, it gets rinsed for it. But I've not seen The Sopranos, but I've seen so much discourse on that final scene. It happened for a reason. Like, they didn't just cut to black because they were like, "Oh, that'll be fucking funny."
We ran out of
Like,
money.
they did it for a reason. So we can't do it because we don't have a reason.
It's funny.
If we establish it now, maybe in like later episodes, then we can.
We're going to do more? I'm only contracted for 7, so...
Oh, well,
Bye, then.
thank God for that. Yeah. means an unhappy conversation doesn't have to happen.
Yeah. Next time, on episode 8, we introduce Matt LeBlanc.
What is it
I don't know why I went with Matt LeBlanc. I think I was thinking how
still
he
doing
replaced...
Top Gear? Maybe he's busy.
No.
No.
That kind of group is all gone.
Yeah, let's move on from this because we're way off topic. So
Well,
that's gonna all be on the editing room floor.
I just want to say the new group is actually pretty decent.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Back to film.
yeah, better than before.
So, I mean, I don't know if you guys had any more thoughts that you wanted to air about editing.
I think
that it's something that, I mean, we've talked about directors, we talked about cinematographers, and now we're talking about editors.
Yeah.
And I think it all comes down to one thing, and it's story and feeling.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Story, feeling, and emotion, and kind of getting to the heart of what you're trying to tell. And I think they all, each of those roles have a responsibility to achieve that. And a goal. Like, it's their goal. That's the point.
And when you think back to
Yeah.
all your everyone's favorite moments in films, it's down to one of the three things. It's down to how it was directed, it's down to how it was shot, and it's down to how it was edited. So it should be held up on the pedestal as a very important role, and I still don't think it is held as lofty as it should be. Even though I think
there's also score.
certainly within the film world, it has some sort of respect on the name and the score for sure. But I think it's slightly a little lower. I mean, filmmaking is very very much a group process anyway.
Very collaborative.
It's very collaborative. But you know, when he's talking about the free thing, is because before there was sound in cinema, you know, it was still edited well. And yes, they did have soundtracks on, but not always. Not every cinema had pianos and organs in them. So these films had to be just silent. So that's what I mean when I say that they're the three things. Is how it's the decisions that are made by the director, the decisions that are made by the cinematographer, and then the decisions that are made by the editor that just make for the most enjoyable storytelling process. And that's kind of as simple as it is, bruh.
Definitely. I mean, just to kind of wrap things up from what I think about editing it as kind of like a whole, as I wouldn't say, because we all have editing skills, but I guess throughout our collaborative work on films, I've done most of the editing.
Yeah, for sure. It's not
editor-in-chief.
It's not my bag, you know. I can appreciate it, but I don't love doing it. So,
but from kind of that technical side, it's weird because editing's one of those where you're like, I guess kind of like cinematography, but it's so technical, but so artistic at the same time. It's not just sitting down at a computer just saying, cut there, cut there, cut there, put these shots in this order, whatever, you know, you might think it is, as we were saying before, a very kind of intuitive job. Whereas the other ones, such as directing, are very, very focused on the artistic, whether you still might have technical aspects of a film, but it is a very, very artistic role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think to sort of put it into very simple terms as well, is when you're editing, you cut and then just carry on playing and watch the next thing and then cut and carry on playing, or do you cut, go back and watch and make sure the cut works?
Oh, you go back and watch 100%.
Well,
exactly.
I mean, for me, it depends on the scene, because sometimes you're like, I'll cut something together.
Works.
And then
But you'll always go back to go. That's my point.
Yeah.
You'll always go back to go and watch the cut. It's not just a cut. Make sure this shot is in place. This shot is in place. This shot is in place.
Exactly.
It has to work as an art form.
And scenes can take months to edit.
Mm-hmm.
Like finding the right shot, finding the right timing of the shot, finding like even frames. Like as we're saying with Jaws, like just finding the right frame to cut on can mean the difference between a really, really great scene and a really, really terrible scene.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think as well, you see it in conversations. Like you could, if you had someone who was kind of just going to cut, it'd be very easy to show a conversation where it's like, hey, I'll show this person speaking, and I'll show this person replying. Like, it's not how it works. You have audio from that shot playing over that shot, and you watch responses. And it's, like you say, it's how it feels.
Yeah, it's all about feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that's a nice little note to end it on. Unless you've got anything else to add, boys.
I think that's a nice little roundup for this episode.
It's all about the feeling.
Lovely.
If you fill my little world right up.
Well, if you had the feeling that this episode was good,
yeah.
why don't you subscribe to us on YouTube? Give us a little like. Follow the podcast on whatever
your podcast provider is.
Yeah, whatever listening device you have it on. We do these every Friday. Until we get bored of them.
Yeah, thank you for giving us your time. It's very appreciated because, with us being in lockdown, it's not like we have anything else to do.
No, I've been making a donut.
Oh,
Blender.
Nice.
A 3D donut.
Next week's all going to be about how Alex has learned Blender.
It's not. Don't worry. Please listen next week. Thank you. Right.
Have we decided?
We've decided we're not doing a special on Blender.
No, like, have we decided what we're doing next week?
We have a shitload of options, so yeah.
Okay.
Well, we can do
Sure.
another poll on Instagram. So I mean, if you want to have a say in what we talk about next week, follow us on Instagram.
Absolutely.
There you go. That's so many things plugged. That's we don't need to.
That's
do it. There
everything.
we go.
Hey, we've got a Twitter as well. Follow us on Twitter.
And
It's
Bebo.
Gaslight Media.
Bebo!
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 All right, that's it. I'm out.